Hello, everyone. You're in for a treat. On this episode of Moments with Martha, I'm speaking to a teacher, Anna Maria Magallon. Not just any teacher. She's an award-winning teacher, an actress, voiceover talent, and even a producer. She teaches junior high students in Central Valley, California. This is primarily a migrant area, and her students some of the most vulnerable. I was once one of those students. I hope with this chat, we gain a little bit more perspective and, quite frankly, a little bit more respect for what our teachers are confronted with every single day. And our students need good teachers like Anna Maria Magallon. Thank you so much and enjoy this episode of Moments with Martha. I just love your essence. Look at your smile. You just like glow. And we've only known each other for 2 months.
I know, it's crazy, right? But we liked it. Was like, boom.
2 months. We met on LinkedIn, which is kind of how I think everybody's meeting these days with the pandemic, right? And we just instantly clicked, I think. And, even I think from that conversation, I invited you to be like my MC at a party. Like, you were probably like, what?
Not just any party, Martha, not just any party. It was your book launch party and it was amazing. And, the other side, be ready because El Otro Lado's coming out soon.
It ends with your help because she's translating for me because she's a teacher, and who better than to get it all out there perfectly than a teacher. So I want to talk. So you said you were born here. Where were you born?
I was born in Modesto, California, and Modesto City Hospital at 5:43 in the afternoon.
Do you know your time? Oh my God.
Yeah.
That is so awesome.
I read my birth certificate and it just stuck.
I'm from the other side. I don't have a birth certificate. I don't know what time I was born. I think the day's even a little bit wrong. And you're fortunate to know what time. But I wanted to talk to you about the people in Modesto when you were born and your papis. What was life there in Modesto when you were growing up?
Well, I'm going to go back a little bit. My mom, they were very poor. So she had to leave school at 3rd grade to literally work. She would sell bread on the streets, and then she sold coffee at the train station when the train would stop. And then she helped out, as an assistant nanny. And then she crossed the border and was working also, as a housekeeper. And then her and her oldest sister decided that they would make the big move, illegally into California. And they worked in the fields. They worked in the Fresno area. So you name it, my mom knows how to do it. And so they're working in the fields. And she met my dad in Fresno at a dance because we're big time dancing people.
I've seen you dance, girl. You're like, this is one thing I'm realizing about our people. We can be this, and then. So we do everything.
A little bit of todo. That's what I call it. Un poquito de everything. Anyway, so they met at the Rainbow Army dancing. And my mom is from the northern part called Nuevo León, And the funny thing is, she's from a little town by Monterrey, which is the capital, which, if you didn't know, is the biggest industrial city in Mexico. And my dad is from the area of Jalisco, and Guadalajara, their capital, is the biggest entrepreneurial city in Mexico. So la ciudad más grande en empresas, una y la otra la capital de la industria. Entonces, so they met. And so I always say, I have the mariachi right here and the accordion over here. That's why I love music. And they got married. And then they continued to be migrant workers, and they really wanted a baby. For 5 years, they couldn't have a baby. And then suddenly here I came. And it's so cute because my mom made my dad stop at a field to take a picture on the way to the hospital to make sure nobody said, how when you're Latina, everything's about what are people going to say? To make sure that nobody would say that she adopted this kid. Well, they couldn't because I'm the splitting image of my father. So she had to take this picture, and I have it. I'm so blessed to have the picture on their way to the hospital. The sad thing is, a year and a half later, my dad died. And I learned, which is something that's always hurt my heart, that my dad was never illegal. One of his brothers helped him come. And, he was a real go-getter. My mom always says that I get it from him. And he already spoke English. And he wanted to stay in the fields because he was already a foreman. He's kind of like a mini supervisor. And my mom, she wanted out. She was so tired. She had been working since 3rd grade. So she learned about the tomato cannery. And she got really excited, because that to her was like, big moving on up. So not being in the fields and being able to work in the factory, where she also worked her way up to be the greaser, which is part of like the mechanics helper. And so then sadly, when I was 1.5, my daddy died. And so here she was with a third grade education from Mexico, $10 in her purse. And she didn't even have money. We lived at the migrant camp in Houston, the little migrant camp. And she didn't even have money to bury my dad, Marta. But when I read your book and you talk about la gente buena, the good people, right? The good people in your life. There's a couple that were from my mom's hometown, Domingo and Maria Lanis. They came to the rescue. They became my grandma and grandpa. And grandpa was one of the few Mexicanos who back in the day owned his home. So he put his house down as collateral. So the bank would loan my mother some money to bury my dad. These people put their house down on a widow who had $10. They believed that she would pay them back, that they wouldn't lose their house. And she did, praise God. And she always has, raised me to be a person of my word and to pay all my bills first.
Mia, I want you to talk about something that you spoke about, the Campitos, because I want everybody to know. People don't know what those Campitos are. I do. I used to visit my cousins in Modesto and in Blythe, Bakersfield, all of those areas over there. But tell people about these camps.
When we were living there, my mom said they called them the accordions because they were literally little accordion. I don't know what they were, what kind of plastic they were made of. And the campers like would set them up, and it was basically one room. Everything was one room. The kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, everything was one room. And then to take a shower, go to the bathroom, you went outside. Believe it or not, I have this faint memory of us standing in line with our towel and our soap to take a shower. And so that's what the Campitos are. They've upgraded. It's still there. And now they have real homes, with their own bathroom and their own shower. Very nice, so praise God for that. And the kids have a little park in the middle where they can go play. We would live in Mexico 6 months and then come back 6 months for the tomato season. And we lived in a garage. We lived in a trailer. We lived in these stinky apartments, Martha, that we washed down with a hose. I kid you not. We washed it with a hose. And my mom got a rash and she had to go to the hospital. And we washed it down with the hose and a lot of soap and everything, like Pine Sol, big thing, and pinole for my
pinole.
Until one year, I think it was 78 or 79, my mom was able to buy a house. And she bought her house for, believe it or not, $25,000. Can you believe that?
I believe it. And you know what? She's so blessed that she was able to do that with $10. Eventually, she bought a house.
I want to share the two pieces of advice my mom would give me as I was a child and a teenager and stuff. She would always say, nunca vivas una vida que no te puedes pagar. Don't ever live a life that you can't afford. And so mom was not big on going on credit. And she would always teach me that credit was for emergencies. Credit was if somebody was sick, if you had to travel, someone died and you had to go back home all of a sudden. Credit was for a house or a car, something that you obviously weren't going to be able to save up, on a cannery income. But she continued in the fields, Marta. My mom remarried when I was 9. She actually married somebody who liked her when they were kids. He lived in Chicago at the time, but they coincided at his little sister's wedding in Mexico. He saw her again. And so long story short, he left Chicago to come work in the cannery with my mom to start a family. We would continue to travel and they would work in the fields. And I would go on Saturdays, of course, and stay in the car because nobody could take care of me. So I had to stay in the car from 4 a.m. till whenever it was lunchtime. And by the time they made it to lunch, I had already eaten the lunch.
But I don't think that was uncommon because there's nobody to take care of these babies, right? So we have to stay in the cars or wherever we're at and for hours, entertaining ours. What did you do?
You know what? We were big yard sailors. And I always liked books, Martita. I think you're not going to be surprised. I was like, I'm becoming a minimalist, but I have like a little baila at the bottom, like the books don't count.
Hey, how did your mom learn to give you this advice? I mean, she only went to school to 2nd or 3rd grade, but how did she learn all of this?
I think she went to the school of life, Marta. So my mom would always tell me to act properly. And she had this one friend she had worked for who had a store. Obviously, in Mexico, they were wealthy, La Señora Mine. And she had a son who was studying to be a doctor in the capital in Monterrey. And when Mine would come down to our little town, called Estación Aldamas Nuevo León, she would send me with her. And so here I go, right? I would go to her office because she had an office, and I would sit there. And basically, it was like a Q&A. ¿Y cómo estás, Ana Maria? And how are you, Ana Maria? And how are you doing in school? And what are your plans? And my mom would always say, hey, remember, mijita, you got to say para y está, not para ni está bueno. You got to say properly, right? So it's kind of like, don't say
Está bueno with the G's.
I think that my mom was an observer, but she would observe. And I remember as a kid also that every morning, like she would do her housework and get her food ready and all her chores. And then she would take a shower and she would put on a pretty dress and heels. And she would sit in the living room to watch TV. And I'd be like, where are we going? And she'd be like, nowhere. People don't have to go anywhere to get dressed. You need to dress every day. You know, you need to be properly dressed. And so she taught me a lot of great things, you know. And I think more than anything, also, like if somebody is sick, you go visit and you take a plate of food. If somebody dies, you go and you cry with them and you console them. Your presence is their strength. Very humane. I think the people that have suffered a lot take one of two roads, right? Either, you know, suck it up because I did, so find your way, or they become very, very compassionate, you know, and they understand the pain. And my mom took this side, the compassionate, like she had suffered. And I remember it got to the point where, you know, we've been moving on up like the Jeffersons.
Yeah.
And in Mexico, we had a girl who would come help her clean, but she never sat alone. When we sat to eat, she sat with us. She was never treated as, oh, well, she's our maid. You know what I mean?
Right.
Quite contrary. You know, she sat with us when we ate together and things like that that really make an impression on the child.
Well, those are beautiful lessons, and I wish that more parents would do more of that and get dressed in the living room and go nowhere, and just visit and just talk to people and visit people. I think now more than ever, Ana Maria, we need more interactions with humans, like in person. We're missing that, and I'm glad that you learned at a very early age that, because I think that's one of the things when I talked to you first that automatically came through. You just were, like, in there, like, if you're in my house giving me a hug, and I felt it, and I felt it, so thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Okay, for people who don't understand the migrant life, it works like this. You know, you get paid 1 week and you live on that check for 2 weeks because the second check, you save it for off season when there's no work. So that's why we would go to Mexico, because in Mexico, with all the money saved, we could live the off season when it was cold and rainy and there was no crops to pick. It was cheaper to live over there. So over there, I remember every afternoon, people would sit outside and we would come to each other's house. And if we had an orange tree, we would cut oranges and share them. And if nothing else, you know, a glass of water or a homemade lemonade. Very, like you said, very social, very in person, you know. See, I had the best of both worlds because I would go to Mexico and I was killing chickens with my grandma, killing pigs with my grandpa. We were planting beans and squash and corn. And I was literally going to the store to get coffee beans and then grinding them with grandma. And then I come to the United States and I would see the Uncle Sam, be all that you can be, you know? And I had the best of both worlds because that filled me with inspiration and it opened doors that I would have never known existed if I would have stayed only in Mexico.
How was it with the kids that were in Mexico that saw you come from the United States? Like, what did they say? "Oh, Ana Maria's here with her fancy dress," or what was that like?
There were all kinds, you know, people who really loved you and accepted you. And then there were those like, oh, she thinks she's all that se cree mucho, ¿no? La del otro lado.
Yeah,
Or,
la del otro
believe it
lado.
or not, you know what made you rich in Mexico? It was so funny.
Say it.
If you could afford white bread, like bread, just bread, you know? Like right now, you're rich if you can afford organic. But in Mexico, if you had bologna and white bread, eras niña rica. You were from the rich crowd, you know? And so it was like crazy because when I was here in California, get this, I would eat with my friends who were Anglo and I would trade my burrito of, you know, rice and beans and carne asada or carne con chile for their pastrami, sourdough sandwiches. I didn't know any of that, Marta. My mom didn't buy
We
that.
didn't have that. Yeah.
So that's how I learned about American food and special meats and sandwiches because they cared so much for my burrito and I cared for their bread sandwich.
I know this. This was a luxury for us because we ate burritos all the time, right? Burritos and
Yeah.
tacos. That's awesome. But you had documents to come.
My dad, who was a legal immigrant, got my mom's papers in order. He was recently sharing with me that people were like me, like her own people, that they're like, "Oh, is he related to the president? How did she get her papers so fast?" Like even questioning that, because they didn't understand. But now that I know a little bit about immigration, well, if you marry a United States citizen, then they can easily, back then, right, more easily than now, I think, could get you papers and get you emigrated. So they were legal. So they continued to go back and forth because, the other thing that's very important to Mexicanos, Marta, is our family. We don't go far away from our family. My neighbors were my grandma and grandpa. And everywhere you turned around my house was an aunt or an uncle or a second cousin. And so my mom also wanted to be off the season to take care of her mom and dad. Because literally, all the aunts, they would always send money, and my aunts would support my grandma and grandpa at this point.
That's awesome. I think it's awesome because in my case, we had no documents. And so we couldn't go. Parents, I think, went back 15 years after, what they wouldn't have done to have gone every season. I think that we have to learn from that actually, because you were okay going back and forth 6 months, not having to be here. And you have these both lives where, some people would say they want to be here all the time. And your family's like, no, it's cool. We want to be over there with our mom or aunts. And, I only need to be here a little bit.
No, they wanted to do their thing and go. Then I came here and then I got awarded being held back because we were so late coming back that they didn't want to take my transcripts from Mexico. So they held me back in third grade, which actually became a blessing, because I learned that I wouldn't have had the friends that I have. And I'm still very good friends with a lot of the girls from third grade. We still stick together. We just had a reunion the other day. Many of us are accomplished, professionals, and others are accomplished in cosmetology and other areas and stuff. But we were talking about that. And another friend works at a bank. And so we were talking, our parents all work together in the fields in the cannery. And I said, look, it was worth it. Look at where we're at. We do have the better life that they wanted for their children.
That's beautiful. And you know what I'm realizing, and I think it's our age, you're around my same age. Like at this age, having gone through decade after decade after decade of things, right? We're just like, I feel like we're just now telling these stories of the Campitos, of the back and forth. Like we're letting all of our, Anglo brothers and sisters and everybody else out there about these lives that, might have been weird. Like, where's Anna Maria one day and she's gone the next day?
They don't know. I was crying the other day because I saw what happened to the strawberries. I was reading the post and there was one gentleman, Latino, who finally got to own 90 acres and everything went underwater in mud. It was in Ventura, just this couple of weeks ago.
With the floods.
And so for him to get everything back, it's going to be $900,000. And then they were talking about the pickers who have no documents and who they can't qualify for any aid.
Nothing.
And so I posted on LinkedIn and I said, hey, I hope that those with power and wealth will want to reach out to our campesinos because they're feeding us,
Yeah.
I will buy these beautiful organic strawberries, but who was stooped over, 10 hours a day under the hot sun, getting those strawberries so I can go, nonchalantly go and buy them.
Right. Without getting into too many politics, I think this is a political conversation. The other day, the president was here in the Santa Cruz area, and he's looking at all the fancy houses that went down, with the flood during the same time that this, strawberry fields and every other field that was around this area, got flooded. And I'm like, I don't believe he went to go visit any of them. So it just kind of goes to show you all you had to do is just drive 1 mile, 2 miles. And it was like, just makes me really, really mad because that's really where the damage is.
You want to know something interesting? We were just reading about Mother Jones when she was fighting for the child labor laws and how she went to go see Theodore Roosevelt and he wouldn't receive the children either. And that broke my heart to see that. We're still in the same boat. And you know what, Martha, this I do want to share, not in the politics arena, but just for us to understand. So we're looking, and I said to the kids in the classroom, I said, hey, so let's look at the child labor's laws now, and you know what it said?
What did it say?
That nobody under the age of 14 can work in a non-agricultural setting.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I thought, well, because I Googled it, so I need to look and see how legit it is,
Mhm.
into it. And then only after 18 can they work in hazardous environments. And
Hmm.
after 14 to 16, it has to be a minimal hours and only certain environments. But I thought, I said to the kids,
Mm.
did you pick up on this? In this,
It's
they
by
can't work in
design.
non-agricultural, but they could, that means you guys could go pick strawberries. You guys can go work in the cotton field. I said, do you realize that, because I think it's important that we educate our youth that they're the future. They're our
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, this is a very interesting thing. If anybody's listening that knows these laws, please chime in after this podcast is out there and let us know what's going on. Let us know your thoughts because that's crazy. Think about it. If they're putting non-agriculture, they want children to work because you pay them a lot less, maybe they're a lot faster. Who knows, right? But that's not right. Hey, so you talked about children. So you became a teacher.
I did. I
How did you
did.
decide that?
I have honestly been blessed like you with so many good people, non-Latino good people. The very first one
Non-Latinos.
I want to acknowledge, and he's still alive and I still talk to him, is Mr. Tim Fast, who was our senior counselor. And I remember he came into our economics class and he told us that when we went out for our dreams, he wanted us to shoot for the moon because if we didn't hit the moon, we would fall right under. Another one was Dr. Pamela McCurdy, which I've been trying to get in touch with because I went to the University of Texas Pan American. Mind you, my first year in one school from beginning to end was my first year in college, my freshman year in college. And I don't think I know now because let me tell you the story. So Dr. McCurdy was my English teacher because I have a BA in English, a master's in Spanish, and a minor in ESL. And I studied at the Adler at the Hollywood, the Academy of Stella Adler Academy of Acting in Hollywood, which is a whole other story. Dr. McCurdy would tell me, honey, you have to promise me you're going to teach for 1 year. And my sociology teacher was her husband, Mr. McCurdy. And later I found out that he was a pastor. But they were very holy Christian people. Never once said a word at school. Never, ever,
Of
never,
course, because you don't
never.
talk about that,
Um,
right?
but I really believe, and I say this with humility, okay? I really do, because I don't want it to sound like I'm trying to be pompous here. But I really believe that they knew that was my calling, one of my callings from
Yeah.
God. Why do I say that? Because I saw a lot of first year teachers be very frustrated, and I walked in and I never felt frustrated. I think that she really knew in her heart. I actually went back to my high school and I taught there for 5 years. And then I was invited, believe it or not. And that was such a special thing. I got a call from the dean of modern languages at the community college. And our community college is Modesto Junior College. And we're going to bring you, Marta. We're going to bring you. So Dean Newman called me and he said, Ana Maria, I've heard amazing things about you. And I want to extend an invitation for you to be part of our adjunct faculty as a Spanish teacher. And mom would work all night in the cannery. And then they would let her leave around 4:30 in the morning to go to the fields. So she worked 2 jobs. And I said, man, if mom can do it in the fields in the cannery, I can do it in the air conditioning. I don't know if it's hard for some people to understand this concept, but see, mommy didn't send me to college to be a professional and a CEO and be great. She sent me to college so that if my husband died, I wouldn't suffer the way she suffered. Does that make sense, señor? It was like, I don't want you. She literally would say, no quiero que pases lo que yo pasé. I don't want you to go through what I went through. I want you to have an education. So then I became a full-time Spanish teacher and started what we call the native speakers program. So Español para Nativos, where you actually study literature and composition and poetry and all that stuff. And so that was amazing. And I was able to also start an academy that I call SABE, Sábados Académicos Bilingües y Educativos. Big shout out to Mary Lopez, a sister teacher that she really empowered me, man. Great Latina lady. I love her. We love you, Mary. You know that a lot of what I am is because of you. And my mom also taught me never to forget where I came from and who helped me out. So Mary and I did these and I created this program and it was so awesome. So we would bring the parents in on Saturday and I would teach them about goal setting, how the high school works, how the college entry works and all that stuff. And then I got to take them to the community college, to a private university, because we have University of the Pacific right here in our backyard, in Stockton.
Yeah.
And then I took him to Stanislaus State University, which is Cal State. And a lot of those kids, I'm proud to tell you, they're principals, they're teachers, they're engineers right now. One of them, I love her, Mrs. Rojas now, Vanessa Rojas is now the principal of the dual immersion school, which my Nina Rosy Ramos started, and I did the first TV show on that with Mary Lopez and her. We did bilingual education versus dual immersion for the community. They only gave her 2 classes to begin, and her with a couple of other teachers ended up building this school. Well, now we have kids from K through 8 that learn English and Spanish, and Anglo kids, Chinese, all kinds.
Everything. Yeah.
Her daughter just became the principal of a trilingual school in my little Riverbank, the city of action. We top languages in the world are Mandarin, Chinese, English, and Spanish.
Okay.
So that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, so 5 years I was there. 11 years I part-time for the community college. I stayed in high school for a long time. Then I got married and I had a baby, and my husband and I decided that I would go part-time so that I could raise my baby. So because of the market crash, they let go of a lot of teachers, and praise God, I didn't make the cut, but they sent me to junior high. And I fell in love with the junior hires, but I love the junior high. I really, really do. For us as educators, I think they're still like clay, moldable clay. It's a very special moment as an educator where you can still touch their hearts. And I just want to say, because Marta gifted me 3 class sets of books, and some of these kids, I've been reading to them because nobody ever read to them as children. I asked them to raise their hand, and that broke my heart. And so when I told them that I had met this wonderful lady from Adobe and that she was going to launch a book and she wanted to gift them a book, there's one specific little girl, her eyes just sparkled, and she goes, Miss Magallon, wait, are you saying it's going to be my book? Like I can take it home?
Honestly, that moment where I gifted you the books, I mean, we were in person and I literally gave them to you, was very life-changing for me. I hadn't even thought about this whole concept of giving to classrooms up until I talked to you. And I said, well, I have to give her books. I have them there. And then somebody else whispered in my ear saying, I want to sponsor a classroom. And then you know what? Another person did the same. And so now I have this list of people. Yeah, I have this list of people, like 40, 50 people that want to sponsor classrooms. So if anybody's listening and you want to sponsor a classroom, a couple $100, 35, 37 kids, I got you. Just let me know. We'll figure out the logistics. That's something I'm working on. But it all started from just giving. And I think that's so beautiful. And what you mentioned when you were receiving the books was about, these kids not having anybody to read to them. Well, one, their parents are probably working or not there or can't, or it's not part of their culture. I mean, I don't remember. I mean, you maybe were a little different, but my parents never read to me ever. I mean, we heard cuentos and stories, and that's, I think, how I fell in love with storytelling. But there was never like a book, hey, mija, déjame contarte el cuento de los tres cochinitos, 3 little pigs. None of that. None of that. We got all of that from school. I mean, you teach junior high. That's a tough age. You teach migrant kids. Some of them are probably coming to this country undocumented, lots of them right now. What are the challenges with these particular kids, and how can we help? And what do we know we need to know about these children?
Well, right now, I only have 3 languages, Pashto, because we have a lot of kids from Afghanistan. Yeah, and we have Farsi speakers, and mostly right now, I have probably 90 something percent Spanish speakers, but there's been years where I do have 5, 6 languages. And I think one of the biggest challenges for me, and I want to invite the Farsi people to go into education, because it breaks my heart, because for my Latinos, I can translate, or I can say, oh, your language works like this. So that's why you're doing that. Let's fix it. Let's do it. For example, let me give you a really quick example. With my Farsi kids, I learned the letter E doesn't exist in their language. That's why they kept forgetting the E in English. I wish I knew all the languages to better serve the kids. The other challenge is a lot of them come from poverty, right? So they don't have the self-esteem, or they don't have the belief of all the great things that they can do just yet. But I do think they have one thing going for them. I believe most of our Afghanistan kids are not here illegally. for our, Latino population, that's the biggest hardship too, because, when you are illegal, you're scared. You don't want to tell anybody. But I think more than anything is making them believe that they are talented and smart. Because this year I started the class with the question and I said, do you know why you're in this class? So my class is titled Academic Language Development, ALD, which is a high end of ESL. So one of the kids says, yeah, because we're the stupid kids. And I said, oh, no, not at all. I said, thank you for saying that because that's the wrong answer and we're going to fix it. I explained to them, I said, you're here because when you entered school, your parents registered and wrote on the paper that your first language, that what you spoke at home was not English. And that's why you're here. And so I'm here to help you develop your English skills, to go up with your native language so that you can go into regular English classes. And the other part as a student, I can tell you is being overwhelmed with so many classes and so much language they don't understand. So much reading has to be done. That's why I keep teaching them reading is power, reading is power. So like one of my secrets that I discovered is that if I teach phonics, I don't know if you guys know this in the corporate world, but in education, we teach reading in kinder, first, second, and third grade. Okay. So you have 4 years. After third grade, you have to read to learn. You don't learn to read. You read to learn. So those first, 3 grades are so important. And I say 3 because kinder is not mandatory. And the stats nationwide were before the pandemic, 4 out of 5 children leave third grade not knowing how to read at level. And do you know what that translates into, Marta? That the jail looks at the third grade level of readers to see how many jail cells they're going to need for that generation, because there's a direct correlation between kids that can't read well and kids that end up in jail.
Nobody talks about that part of why you should, push for reading or read to your kids.
They don't even have to read in English. If you know how to read in your language, read to your kids in Spanish and Chinese and whatever. Because when you have high literacy in your, what we call the L1, your first language, your second language develops faster. So if I tell you, Marta, a sustantivo is a noun. And you don't know what a noun is, Marta.
Right.
I didn't tell you anything. A sustantivo is a noun.
X. Right.
But if I say, Marta, manzana is an apple, and you know what an apple is.
Right.
So now I have knowledge.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing because what happens if, kids go to you and they get there in 4th grade or 5th grade, they miss that whole thing. Now their parents don't, let's say they're not there or never read to them. So these poor kids are just scrambling to try to catch up, or you guys catch them up somehow, but you can't because you're grading 150, 200. Like it's going to be too few that actually get through.
When you have 37 needy kids in a class, 37, when in reality, these classes should be no more than 18 kids, sometimes even 15. The other challenge is, like you said, all the different levels. And the law says that children only get 12 months to learn English. And let me tell you, because I looked up this law, this I can quote verbatim. And the law understands that research proves that it takes 7 years to be fluent in a language, but yet they say 12 months, and then they have to mainstream into regular English classes, regular history, regular science, and regular everything. So what are they doing to our kids? You know what I call it? I call it the modern day slavery, because that's how we keep them down. We're not going to be able to teach them in 12 months when it takes 7 years. It used to be that they had 4 years, but the laws changed. And I'm thinking, how did these laws change? Why weren't we there? How did we not know?
But you mentioned like this interesting visual of like, kids that are not reading that end up the equivalent of jail cells, that are accounted for later in the future, right? We should be telling our parents this. Here's what people think is going to happen to your kids. Just prove them wrong or something, So there's a whole effort around parents that we need to push, because I know you probably have challenges with parents, like showing up to parent teacher conferences and all of that.
Yes. Big time.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that?
I feel very sad because they don't understand. And my husband and I were discussing it earlier. They don't understand. And he actually said, how can we get these parents to understand and get inspired in the education of their children? They don't understand that teachers can't do it alone. It's actually like a table with 3 feet on it. The educators and administrators, the community, and the parents. We have to work together.
But like you said, there might be other reasons why things are not happening, but I feel like we have to push it at the immigration level so that we make it almost kind of mandatory and dangle the little, carrot for these parents to say, hey, if you want, a job, whatever it is they're here for, right? Then you must do this. And then you get
Yeah.
some kind of an incentive. You must do this. And then if your kid maybe, reads at a certain level, they get there's some incentives. And that's where my corporate side comes in because we give incentives to people to behave a certain way. Well, you know what? The government can do that too. So I feel like we have to demand it. I think it's people like you, like me, people who've been here decades that need to say, no mas, this ain't working. One thing I feel like we're getting better at is actually linking ourselves together with these people. Like, you're like, Martha, you need that, instead of holding that knowledge back, you're a teacher, you're giving it, you do that, effortlessly. And that's why you're here. Because I wanted you to just tell everybody from a teacher's perspective, what do we need to do? What do we need to do as parents, as somebody from the outside, as people who are developing programs for kids like the ones you're dealing with every day? They need to know what's happening in the classroom. Show up, ask questions, If anybody wants to reach out to Ana Maria and get more insights on this, Ana Maria, you've been really gracious and offered of your time to me many times now. How can people get a hold of you? And is there something I missed or that you want to let the audience know about that I might have not covered?
I don't see myself as a teacher in the classroom. I see myself as a talent scout. My job is to help the kids find their talents. And one thing that I want to share to every child, every young person, every old person in the planet that's listening to this is that we were all made with talents, and our talents are for the good of the community. They are for us to leave the world a better place when we leave. One step that I push further in the classroom is find your talent and your passion and help them meet, boom, this incredible life is going to come out because you are in your purpose. You are doing what you're passionate about. No one can do everything, but everybody can do something. And don't let anybody tell you any different.
You just hit on something and I don't want to just leave it, but you said you're a talent scout. And I love that because I think teachers are getting a bad rap right now, and I think that if they go in with this attitude that you have, Ana Maria, this passion that you have for teaching, and I think that's one thing that the community that you're talking about is not privileged to have. I was not privileged to be exposed to these different things that might have gotten my talents out until later in life. That's why at 50, I'm writing a book. I didn't write it at 30. That's why at 50, I started to speak, not at 25.
Let me interrupt because, you and
Yeah.
I are very creative and we always think of ideas. Well, I was awarded a Maestra de Impacto award from Univision. I reached out to my community because Modesto is full of great people. It really is. Modesto and Riverbank and the whole area. And guess what I did? I created what I call los oradores de impacto, the impacting speakers. So I brought to the classroom lawyers, entrepreneurs, immigration judges. I have the twins. Oh, you got to meet the twins, California Highway Patrolmen. And I brought them into my classroom.
Yeah.
And guess what they all had in common? They were all ESL migrant field working people at one point. I brought them to show the kids, look, they were you. They were sitting there being you. Another kid was like, before I met you, I didn't know how to dream. Thank you for teaching me to dream. I mean, these letters, they were like breaking my heart.
Yes.
I wanted, so we got to go to Univision in Sacramento. We took all the kids this one class. We took them to Univision and we took them to the Capitol. We walked the Capitol. So many of them, mija, the only trip they had taken was to the remate, the flea market. They had never left Modesto, a lot of them. So I am doing a shout out to both educators and professionals. It doesn't have to come from Miami or New York. You are right there in the city. You're a professional. You're a CEO. You're a CFO. You're a marketing, senior manager. Go out into the classroom that's closest to you.
And that's why I am so passionate about these kids. I mean, you talk about junior high, it's like we can still mold them, right? We can still give them hope. And I want everybody who's listening that's from my world, from the corporate world, to just say, hey, I was like that too. Because I have to tell you, amongst the corporate world themselves, we're still kind of shy to say, oh my God, I come from that world too. Don't say it for you, say it for them. We're going to make a difference. And I do think this is our part one, Ana Maria, because I think in your story written for us, we're going to make a difference. I want to thank you for being here, for being you. I can see why you were awarded all of these things. I can see why you can do 12 things, and I can see where you can inspire. And I wish that every kid out there has a teacher like you.
If you allow me, I want to leave everybody with this phrase. One of my favorite reads is Facundo Cabral's, "You're not depressed, you're distracted. No estás deprimido, estás distraído." One of the phrases that I like to put up in my classroom is dice, "El que hace lo que ama está benditamente condenado al éxito. He who does what he loves is blessedly condemned to success."
Wasn't that incredible? Our teachers are the most prized asset. Our students are the most valuable as well. Let's maximize their value by taking time and identify their talents. I just love that point. Let's show them both their worth and their place. Give them value, give them opportunity. To all you teachers out there, thank you for what you do for the students like me. Thank you for listening to Moments with Martha. I hope you enjoyed this show. Adios.